Welcome to Culture Before Content. Culture Before Content, from Music for All and presented by Yamaha. And now, here's your host, David Duarte.
Hey, my name is David Duarte, and I'll be your host on Culture Before Content. So I'd like to start with Music for All's vision before we get started today. Music for All's mission is to create, provide, and expand positively life-changing experiences through music. And that's for everyone, including me, not only for students, but teachers too. I hope this podcast and the great content of the Music for All podcast network helps support our vision and mission. Well, welcome to Culture Before Content. So, what is this all about? This podcast aims to transform the band classroom into something special. In each episode, we hope to discover why we as educators can create more than just a place for music instruction. It can and could be a vibrant community of collaboration and growth, where how we do things contributes to creating the music that we teach. By sharing real life stories with guests from across the country and offering practical advice, we hope to demonstrate how an inclusive and positive classroom culture enhances student engagement and the entire learning experience. So, whether you're a fellow educator or a music enthusiast, join us in discovering how to shape each band class into a space where students and educators are excited to learn, participate, and thrive, all in a safe space. So, how did I get here? Why David Duarte? What's going on? It all started when I was asked to write an article a couple years ago. Matter of fact, we had just come back from it was my first semester back after we had the kids from COVID, and I was asked to write an article, and so it's performance through a introspective environment. So really, what it comes down to is classroom culture. And so, if you get a chance to read the article at some point, that'd be great. But basically, it comes down to we are the salespeople of our content. I used to think when I was first a young teacher that it was all about what was in my head. And as long as the kids do what I said, that was teaching. But it wasn't. It really came down to I had to sell the students on my content. You know, when you first, many of us take over programs, do you always get the Cadillac or do you get sometimes you get something a little bit less? I know when I first started teaching, I had the privilege of starting at my old high school. So I kind of got a false sense of belief of the culture of my school. So really for me, my voyage of discovery actually occurred at my second school. I had a whole 12 kids and six of them were drummers. And so I started my band with 12 kids and it just started from there. And I really had to sell myself to these kids to get them to buy into the program. Because, at that point, I had left a program that had been to national conferences, done all the good things. And then I came to a school and oh my gosh, the kids didn't do what I said. And I kind of struggled for a little bit and it just took me off my game. And so it was thinking about producing the band that I wanted and not the one, producing the band that I want and not the one that I wanted or had. So I had to start over from scratch and basically taught myself how to teach. So it was basically trying to get those kids to buy into what I had to do. So it started with creating that space where kids could thrive. It didn't matter that some of those kids, matter of fact, I don't think the four quarter notes that we played to start the rehearsal, none of them were together. And it just kind of reminded me that, wow, I'm going to have to teach. It's not about, hey, here's how it goes and do that. Nope. It's about providing an environment. So it really came down to the social emotional influences that we have in our classroom. And so getting to know your students, getting them to talk about the program, getting them to bring kids in. And so I started that vision with about 12 kids. And by the time we got to the start of the school year, we had about 25, 26 kids. And I think I did my first football game with about almost 30 kids. And, many of those kids were starting, but the kids were going out and they were buying into it. They were bringing kids. I had some kids who never even played their instrument before, which I didn't know at the time. I thought they just hadn't practiced a lot. But I took the time to get to know the kids and let that feeling of a safe space and the kids feeling in a welcome environment so that they could start bringing their friends in. And it worked. And by the end of that first year, I actually got up to about 48 kids in the band program. Luckily, for the most part, it was about the kids who left the program and decided to come back because there was no trust in that classroom. But just building that safe space with clear expectations did wonders. And then lastly, it's about shared vision. And so this is something I also learned on that first transfer of job. My vision isn't what the kids' vision is when you take over a program. As I said, I think the first year for me when I take over a program becomes the word grin and bear it. Because even though you know what's right, sometimes you just have to wait until they discover it. So, how do we discover it? And I will say, I think it's mostly about the culture of our band classroom. I think the culture is not, specific to the band classroom. It's really about specific to anything that we do. Your family has a culture, and some of the things that we do. Them, some of us do music at night, and those music groups have culture. They all have a culture that we have to find our way and fit into. But how do we get that shared vision as a teacher? And so I say I view myself not as a teacher, but more as of a guide. And so that instructional part of my brain has to shut down for a moment until I can get the kids to do what I want. I remember once when I took over a program, I told the kids we were going to do scale tests, but I forgot to prepare them for that. And I had two kids go to the office and drop my class, and there was no getting them back because my vision of what makes a good band program when you start somewhere new isn't theirs. So I've now learned that when you have change or something, what you think is something innocent or for that's how we do things. Sometimes it has to come from the shared vision. So that's what the article is about. It's how do we help students find our vision, and then how do we get them? So a lot of the things and tricks that I used to do and still do is I try to get the kids to use my words, but I'm not allowed to tell them. So I try to get the words out of their mouth, and that's how we shape things, and that's how things go to this day. So let's talk about the culture of this podcast. Welcome to the first show. This is the first one. We're going to try a few things and see what works. But I'm hoping that many of you out there become listeners of the podcast and help shape what it is that we do here. Because it's, listening is learning. Talking is experience. Bringing all these people in is something fun to do. But when you don't know what everyone wants to know, it's like, it's not always about we've got to win this contest. Sometimes it might be about, hey, how do I find more kids? Or what did you do that was successful? Or what are some things that you do in the classroom? And let's take time to find some of those things to share. So also, I will say this, invite your friends, find some people to come to this podcast. Heck, invite your enemies for all I care. Bring anybody, bring everybody. Again, this is the culture of, for me, it's about the culture of us and not the culture of me. Matter of fact, as we get through this first intro, I hope never to really ever have this be about me, because I want it to be about our guest and I want it to be about you, the listener. So engage with us and help shape what we're about to become. Programs come in all shapes and sizes, and we want to recognize what happens in all types of schools and programs and be less alone out there. I currently teach in I won't say a small school, I teach in a smaller school, but it is definitely different for someone who, I've taught in schools of 3,000 and now I'm teaching in a school about 1,000. It's quite different. Its expectations are different. When somebody tells me they have, I've got 150 beginners, I think to myself, I don't even think I have 150 kids in my class, in my grade level. So we want to find some of those common experiences and not always focus on, the performance aspect. Sometimes it's good to focus on the growth of our programs or things that we do that make it better. So help me shape this into a place for everyone. So let's talk about our topic today and our first guest. I'm a little excited. This is going to be fun. Today's topic is inclusion and enjoyment. So think about that for just a second. How to make the kids in your program feel included. And at the same time, let's make sure that the kids are enjoying the things that we do. Because sometimes it is a little bit about the fun and you can still have those high expectations and make it work. Our guest today is a product of the Music for All experience. And I think I'll let you get to know him a little bit, and we'll talk about his experiences there and see what he has to offer. So I need your teaching approach to foster a positive learning environment. And that is really the way it is. How do we make our teaching foster that learning environment? So hopefully you can expect the unexpected coming up. You get a chance to hear what other people have to say about our culture and our music. And so without any further ado, I want to welcome to the show, Mr. Matt Wood.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me. So happy to be here.
Oh my gosh, Matt, it is so nice to finally get a chance to talk to you in this amazing environment. So I'm going to spill the beans a little bit here, but Matt and I have known each other, gosh, maybe 2 months, maybe, I don't even, not too
Yeah,
long.
about that time. Yeah.
Yeah, really the experience of, getting this podcast started and just sharing. So we are new to each other, but we have become quick friends. So I think you're really going to enjoy what we're going to talk about today. So you ready to get started, Matt?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So, one of the things I want to do is let's talk about on our guest. Where did you go to high school? Where did you go to college? And where are the places that you have taught? Because it's nice to hear the familiar sounds, or maybe it's a chance to focus on some of the things and places that we've all have in common. So, tell us about your high school, college, and the places that you've taught.
Yeah, so I grew up in San Antonio. Graduated from Winston Churchill High School, so I am a product of BOA. We went to BOA events all 4 years that I was in high school. Went to Grand Nationals, San Antonio, Houston, other regionals throughout the great state of Texas and beyond. And those events changed my life. That really showed me just how powerful music education can be for not just our community, but for other communities. Having 8 or 9 thousand people there that evening watching just the bands. I still remember my first BOA show finals of seeing that crowd and going, "Wow, they're all here for us." So that was really really powerful, and really kind of inspired me initially when I wanted to kind of pursue and continue in music, to give kids those opportunities. I went to Texas State University, which is right between Austin, Texas, and San Antonio, in a town called San Marcos that gets bigger and bigger by the year. And just a great, great school for music education. Was really lucky to just have a lot of great experiences in those 4 years. My first job was in a town called College Station, Texas. It's most famously known for where Texas A&M is, and wasn't necessarily what you would consider a rural community, but it was per se isolated. There were 4 high schools in the area, about the same size, and then there was about 50 minutes in any direction before we got to any other larger kind of metropolitan area. So I've been in an area that has support and resources and things like that, but was isolated like a lot of places are in the United States. When COVID hit, I wanted to move a little bit closer to home, and became a band director at Rouse High School in Leander ISD. Very, very great school district for fine arts and band, and just support of the arts in general. And then this past summer, I accepted my first position as a head band director. I'm now a head middle school band director in Round Rock ISD at Ridgeview Middle School, which is in the Cedar Ridge cluster.
All right, that's amazing. That's a great story. And so you've hit many of the different levels of teaching music, and I think that's also one
Mhm.
of the important things I want to stress on this podcast is we don't want to just focus on the high school. We want to focus on everything because we all do it. I mean, here's think about it. Some schools you got band directors teaching from beginning band all the way to 12th grade and making the whole program work. And I'm curious to know a lot about that. So you mentioned, you started in high school. So then what made you decide that you wanted to be a music major? Maybe talk about who you are as a musician and
Mhm.
and then, your high school experience and then talk about what got you into high school or excuse me, what got you into college as a music major.
Yeah, so I think I maybe have a unique path, of I was not ever the first chair player. I wasn't the all stater. I never actually even made a region band in middle or high school. I was a struggling musician all the way through college. And I think that really shaped me in many multiple ways. I think it taught me how to have some grit and perseverance, that I can kind of empathize, but I can also empathize with my students because they're going through what I've gone through for a majority of my experiences in music, and it helps them kind of understand that they're not alone. And it was through music that I saw how much better of a person I became, not because of the quarter notes and the half notes and that it was just the life skills it taught me, that I wanted to do that and to help the next generation kind of discover that too. So I was a clarinet player. Started out, I was for 6 years. I was in my freshman year of high school. I was the last chair of the fourth band at Winston Churchill High School. I moved up to the third band the next year because there wasn't a fourth band anymore. The program had gotten a little bit smaller, and so they just made the concert bands a little bit bigger each. So I was promoted by default, but I was still not the greatest. And it got to the end of my sophomore year. I was working my tail off. My parents were, um, you know, really supportive and were giving me opportunities like private lessons and things like that. And I just felt like I wasn't making the progress that I could, to really get into a school of music in college. So I went to my band director. I still remember the day. It was June 1st, in 2012, in tears, and just saying, I'm never going to make a school of music on clarinet. I don't know what to do. Can I try euphonium? And they were like, "Well, that's kind of odd." And I said, "Well, that was the other instrument they gave me in my instrument interview in sixth grade. And if they thought I was going to be good at it, I want to see if I am, you know?" And so they sent me home with a baritone, and I taught myself and then started taking some private lessons. And a year and a half later, made the school of music at Texas State. Not initially, I was placed on a wait list, but then was let in over the summer, and kind of the rest is history of getting into that school. I was.
Amazing. So that actually brings me to a question about your own program now versus how you
Mhm,
were as a high school kid. So
mhm,
I'm thinking to myself, the culture of practice. I think my version of that has changed quite a bit over the years. Do kids have always had the opportunity? Well, we expect kids to practice. Let's be honest. But can a kid always practice? And is that something you've noticed in your program? There's no way everyone says all the kids can practice. I mean, it'd be nice if that was
mhm.
the truth. Are you noticing a different like approach to how kids practice in your own program versus the program you grew up in?
Sure. I mean, I think it's really dependent upon every community. Some communities, those kids have the time to do that. And in others they can. And even within maybe the program as a whole, there's some folks that are involved in club soccer um, and student council and other things that they don't have a ton of time. But I think that it's important that we still teach them the skills that they can use if they have the ability to. But I think as teachers, we also have to. I always go into a rehearsal. Um, and this may be cynical, but I always assume that nothing has been worked on from the last time we were there, and then generally am pleasantly surprised because things do sound a lot better because they have been working on it and things like that. But I think a lot of it is your own expectation. If you place all of it on the kids and don't necessarily take ownership in their learning as well, you'll find yourself probably disappointed most of the time. And I think that that's probably a really unhealthy way of kind of going through the gig and still enjoying it.
Yeah, the reason I was asking is because like I said, I teach at a smaller school. I don't teach at a small school, but a lot of my bands, the wrestlers, the volleyball players, the soccer
Hmm.
players. I have a varsity basketball kid, and we've had to make a two cultures happen. One is it's okay to stay in band, and number two, it's okay to do your sport and stay in band. But then I was thinking to myself as you were talking about it, some of that practice has to take place in some of those rehearsals, and I was wondering if if how you structure your rehearsals builds any of that into
Hmm.
your yeah. So all right, well, let's move on. So
Yeah.
number one, next thing, which I think is exciting, and how we met, is you are a product of Music for All, of why you're here today. So why don't you talk about all your experience that you've had with Music for All before we start our topic?
Sure. It's quite a bit, and I'm so thankful for just the organization of continually providing me with those positively life changing experiences. Again, I started out as a product of BOA, so I knew of the organization. I didn't necessarily know all the things that they also did besides the Bands of America events, really until my senior year of college. And it was I had just graduated. I'd gotten my first job. It was the summer, and a friend of mine, Susan Smith, messaged me and said, "Hey, Matt, what are you doing next week?" And I said, "Nothing. What's going on?" She goes, "Well, there's this camp up in Indiana that I think that you would really enjoy being a part of. Yamaha is offering scholarships still. So I would encourage you to apply for it if you think that you could be there next week." So I went on. She sent it to me. I went on, filled out the information. An hour later, got a call from from Aaron Fortune at Music for All, and said, "Hey, we're going to offer you this scholarship. Just want to make sure that you can get up there. So take a look at flights." And I said, "Flights? I'll just hop in the car." And I drove. Me and my friend drove about 15 hours over 2 days from San Marcos, Texas, to Muncie, Indiana, to be a part of the 2018 Summer Symposium. And that was an incredible experience. If you ever get the chance to go to the Director Academy, um, I think it's just so invaluable. It's my favorite time of year. Just the professional development and the camaraderie that we had there was incredible. And I guess I made an impression on enough folks that a couple weeks after the event had happened, now one of my best friends, his name is Jarrell Horton, messaged me and just said, "Hey, we're looking at expanding the team for next year on the what they call the Director Academy Assistants." And we just we're the behind the scenes people, make sure that everything runs smoothly on the director's side. He said, I really think you should apply for this. I think you'd really enjoy this." And so I applied for it, and got asked to come to camp now on kind of the service side and helping with it, and have been there since. And through there, met many other people through in Music for All, and um, a couple years later was asked to uh, be a event staff member at the National Concert Festival, which is usually around March or April. A great event in Indianapolis. And then now I also do BOA events. So you'll see me at Grand Nationals. You'll see me at some Texas shows and other places throughout the country. Any free Saturday I have, they put me on a plane, and I spread those positively life-changing experiences.
That's awesome. Like I said, a lot of times, as a director, if you're not in the general area of things, sometimes we don't even know things exist. And that's why I said trying to branch all these things, because I all I heard the whole time you talked was one word: community. And so it sounds to me like that community became super helpful to you on and why you're here. So let's talk about why you're here: inclusion and enjoyment. So we were talking earlier, and we were talking about what makes Matt. So let's
Mhm.
talk about inclusion enjoyment. What is your philosophy on your program, and how is inclusion enjoyment a part of Matt Wood's program?
Absolutely. I think at Ridgeview, my goal is that those kids have a great experience and learn not only musical skills but life skills through it. And I think what they, I've only been there for a couple months. This is my first year, but I think the students have really um, start to understand that if we're going to do something, our goal is to do it as well as we can. It doesn't mean getting a certain score, a certain number, or making the region band or things like that. But we're gonna push ourselves to be the best at whatever it is. Whether it's a band social, we're gonna make sure that everyone that goes to that has a blast. Or it's a concert, we're gonna make sure that it runs smoothly. Um, if that it the audience has a great experience, that the kids on stage have a great experience, um, things like that. And I think um, that's so important because it's going to transfer to other things in their life. They may not play their clarinet after they're a senior in high school, or when they graduate college ever again. It may sit in the closet for 20 years until they have their own child that is going through band, and they bring it out and play with them, or give it to them, or things like that. But I think there's skills that they can learn through what we do, and that's a integral part of my philosophy and what we do at Ridgeview.
And so, what are some things that you feel like you do well culturally using this inclusion and enjoyment philosophy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important that you're empathetic with your community, especially coming into a new one. Um, the very first thing I did when I met the students, we have a thing called the BLT. We call it the band leader. It's the band leadership team, but BLT for short. And we did a little leadership training for 2 days just to kind of get to know them. And the first thing we did, very first thing, I introduced myself. We played, a little get to know you game, and then we did a thing called I like, I wish, I wonder, and it was completely anonymous. And I just gave them sticky notes and I said, I want you to write down things that you liked about last year. I want you to write down things you wish you had gone a little bit better. And I want you to write down things that you wonder if we had tried that maybe everyone would have just a more positive experience in band. And that was really eye opening. I think it's really important that you seek first to understand and then kind of be understood. You have to understand the people you're serving before they're going to want to listen to anything that you have to say. And so empathy is such an important part of what we do as leaders of a program, um, that it is, honestly, the first thing that you should be trying to do. I think that I also um, really try to celebrate the things that um, students do outside of the band hall. They're only here with us for 50 minutes a day. And yes, I live in here and my life is band, but theirs may not be. They may have other activities that they're a part of. So we celebrate the basketball team, we celebrate the football team, we celebrate the esports team, we celebrate other activities every Monday. The first 30 seconds after announcements is just, hey, who has something great to share about the weekend, or maybe what happened last week, and just let them share it. Sometimes it's, I got to see my cousin who I haven't seen in a month, or we won our soccer tournament, or things like that. But showing them that you care about them as a person, and not just as the third chair clarinet player that sits to your left every day, I think goes miles, with building trust in them, and just uh, them wanting to kind of reciprocate their efforts. And then the last thing I think that I pride myself in is just trying to be having very clear expectations, in a structured way. It makes everyone feel comfortable. It makes me feel comfortable. It makes the kids feel comfortable. They know that they come in, they know that they assemble their instruments. They know that in those 2 minutes that they have before class, they're allowed to do exercises from one of 3 pages that they have in their binder. They know I'll raise my hand, and that's their cue to raise their hand and stop playing, and we start announcements, and then we go through our process of just getting better throughout the day.
That's awesome. And what right popped in my head was, I was an administrator for 11 years, and I got to go through classroom after classroom after classroom. And I think that's partly why I have a very biased and quite different vision of what the classroom looks like today. Sorry, I was administration people. It wasn't my fault. And I retired and came back to teaching because I missed the kids. And so what I'm hearing though is, when I walked into classrooms, and I used to worry about, because I'm sorry, I was of the mindset of, performance is everything, superior that, first place that, and I'm completely different now. I finally realized success looks different for different people, and we need to celebrate that. We need to celebrate that more across this country. And like I said, moving to the smaller program has really brought that out into me, about nobody knows what my success is. And I think I told you, I'm totally stealing your idea for tomorrow. I'm totally gonna do the kids celebrations and start making that part of our culture on Mondays. I think that's great. But I was thinking to myself, is, how do you get those expectations? Because I think that's one of the things I noticed was, classroom management is probably one of the biggest inhibitors of success in the classroom. And so you say, I have these clear expectations, but sometimes we've got to accept we're not all the best classroom managers. I mean, it's funny when you take over a program where there's a set of rules, the kids act a certain way. But what about those people that are going to a new place, or they're taking over a program where these kids don't just do what they say? I always say this, you get the eye roll from the kids, and that I think that is like the that creates so much stress in my eyes, because I feel like I've walked into that situation. But then over time, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, I'm now in my third year of the program, and it looks quite different. Okay, you're in first year of a middle school program. How did
Mhm.
you create that culture? What was in place before you? What did you do? Give us some thoughts.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, some of the you have to kind of be a chameleon those first couple years I'm learning. And so some of the things that I'm doing with them are things that they already know. They know that they have to be in their seat with it before, 2 minutes after the bell rings, which is honestly something I've always done. So that's an easy thing to adapt. Once um, I think that if I had told them the first day of school, okay, when you sit down, I'm going to let you play your instruments on your own. I am unsure of what we maybe would have heard. We maybe some Land of a Thousand Dances and other things. And it was through we're really lucky that we're able to have sectional rehearsals. Instrument specific or smaller groups of instruments before or after school on our campus. So for those first 6 or 7 weeks, I was teaching them basically those things that I wanted them to do in those 2 minutes. And once every section kind of had that, like, I knew that when I walked in, I would kind of bounce back between our room and the door that we let kids in um, from outside. And I knew it was about week 9 of school that when I walked into the room every morning, after letting the last group of kids in, and everyone had their stuff set up and we're doing those fundamentals that we were working on in sectionals on their own before we started, that they were ready to start doing that in class. We could have that trust and they had that understanding. So I think it takes a lot of time. Something that was always said to me was it takes 25 miles to turn a cruise ship. um,
Mm.
it's going to take time. There's no substitute for it. So you just have to meet them where they are and slowly guide them kind of in the direction that you envision, over weeks, months, sometimes years, uh, for it to be really the culture that you're looking for.
So and like kind of spying on you and talking to you, set some goals and established a vision that we talked about. Do you remember that what we talked about? Can you share that with the audience? Do you remember what you
Not specifically.
I'll tell you what you said to me and then you can react to it.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
in talking to you, you said teach students how to set meaningful goals for the band program and help them develop a shared vision for their collective musical achievements. It was just something that you said out loud and I told you I was going to hold you for this. So, how do you get for me how do you get your middle school kids to get that shared vision? Because here's what I said. I know you told us some of the process. Do you have a reward system? Is it as simple for you as the kids there's got to be something that's making the kids buy into your shared vision.
hmm I think that anything that works for you is great. Reward systems, things like that. I think what's been really helpful for me is that I've been just very genuine with them. I'm honest, not in a rude way or anything, but I let them know when they're doing things really well. I let them know when we could be better at things. I mean, just, hey, we're going to guide at this. I'm not a yeller. Um, but I do hold them to a high standard, and I think that every kid wants that, whether they'll even admit that or not. But again, it takes time. You have to get to know them. Those first couple weeks, I wasn't sure if there was a single child that was on my team. But it becomes a domino effect of once you get a few, many more start to really buy into what you're doing. And I'm going to borrow something from my fine arts director in Leander, Mike Howard. Um, he was really big on every PD session we had with him talking about how the bulk of your culture comes from your class time. That's the most amount of time that you're ever going to spend with them. And if that's enjoyable, they're going to want to keep coming back. So we really focus on being the best versions of ourselves, working really hard in those 50 minutes, but we have a little bit of fun in it, between fundamental. They know I'm a big Disney Parks fan. So between fundamentals and when we're getting the music out to give percussion some time to, transition, I'll let them know of some Disney fact that I had learned in the last couple days or something like that. And they really look forward to that, and or you have your things that they know about you. And I think that just as you're trying to get to know them, them getting to know you is going to is going to really help them with buying into you. Because it's like what your article was saying, like we're salesmen, uh, we have to sell a product, and that product is ourselves.
I think my friend said it best for the high school. How do you tell a kid, "Hey, did you want to walk around with a chicken on your head and then wear, some really heavy clothes in the middle of summer and you'll be sweating quite a bit. But you know what? It's fun. But how do you get them to believe you?" So it kind of, you've already been at 3 programs now. You started off first
Mhm.
program, second, third. So how have you
Mhm.
evolved over time? What's changed in Matt Wood?
Well, I think teaching before COVID and then during and then after has given me a huge, 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 huge perspective of how quickly things can change, because of outside factors. So I think, um, having patience is something that I think I had a good deal of when I first started teaching. But when COVID hit, that's when I really had to start to become patient and empathetic beyond what I ever probably would have been if the world had continued the way it was. Um, it takes time for a culture to build. It takes time for sometimes a kid to finally be able to play G on the French horn. It takes time for that student to remember to turn in their practice record without the fifth reminder, or you personally walking them to the bin to turn it in. But you should never give up because of that, because what we're doing is changing kids' lives, and sometimes it's a huge step, and sometimes it's a baby step with a fumble and falling flat on her face. But that shouldn't change our approach and what we do every single day.
What about your expectations for your kids? How has that changed over time?
I think just with more experience, it's made me realize, like, okay, this is something that should take about this amount of time, and I can kind of gauge it a little bit better. Um, I think that we all are coming from, when we're just coming out of college. When I was mentoring student teachers, this is one of the harder things I had to get them to realize, is that you just spent 4 years with some of the best musicians at their school, and now you're teaching a sub non varsity group of a very great program, but they have areas of growth. They're not college music majors where you pass out symphony in B flat and you can read through it for the most part. Um, and so what can they do on in the first week, during the day, in the first week? What can they do within a month? That kind of stuff. I feel like I've gotten a lot better at just kind of gauging, this is where we're at, this is where we can be. And it makes me less stressed, it makes the kids less stressed, because they're going to feed off of whatever vibe you're giving them, right? And I think that also, communicating those expectations of, we should really be trying, we should be working towards, you know we want to run the full concert program 3 weeks before our evaluation, be able to do it top to bottom at the tempos, everything else, and just say, hey, this is what we're working towards. And if we need to change that goal, we can. But I think communicating your expectations to not only you, but to your staff and to your students, is so important.
Oh, I agree with you there. I always say it. I said sometimes I have to back off because my expectations get a little too high. You always hear that adage, program for the band you have, or the band you have, not the one you want. And so
Right.
sometimes we get locked into like, okay, if I just program this grade 6, then we'll be able to play this grade 1.5 really well. And so we always fall into that trap. But the expectations are to get there. But now I think what has changed over time is what it takes to play this has to be incremental steps to get there.
Mhm.
And then at some point when it meets, boom. So let's talk about some of the people that have influenced you. Because it's a time to, I call this drop your name segment. This is a time to, I know, right? So, who are some of the people and, where are they? Who are they? and just talk about it. Cause I was, as we were talking earlier, fans, there's a person who changed my career. I can tell you the date. I'm sorry. I can tell you when it happened. It was during marching season in 2005. And I heard the most incredible marching band do the most incredible crescendo. And it completely changed my pedagogical approach to how a band's supposed to sound. And I owe that person a thank you. And I don't even think they know. And I haven't even told them who they are yet. And I want to hold off for a while. So, who are the people that have influenced you, Mr. Wood?
I too many to name. I feel like there's a you can learn from anybody that crosses paths with you in your life. Yourself included. I've had a pleasure of getting to know you over the last 2 months, and just I've learned so much from you, and I'm really grateful for that. But the ones that really I can think of that almost on a daily basis, I'm still um, thinking about things that they've taught me. Um, I was a freshman in college, and I was, recruited by a senior who was working with a marching band in the area to start coming to some rehearsals at a school called Dripping Springs, which is a southwest suburb of Austin. And the band director there had been there for a super long time. His name was Keith Lancaster. He's retired now, but I'm so grateful for him. You know, not only continuing to just check in on me, and part of it's because he's contractually obligated. He works for the tour company we use, but he's always there. He's still there for me, and we haven't worked together full time in 7 years, but he gave me a chance. I had zero teaching experience. I was very green. I hadn't even taken an education course in my undergrad, and he gave me an opportunity. And then for 4 years, I was involved with that program and just learned so much of how to be a band director through him. On campus at Texas State, Mary Ellen Cavett, who does a lot of things in the field of music education, and took near the end of my degree, moved up to administration at the university, and has now uh, gone back to teaching music full time at Texas State, and which I'm so happy about. But she has just invested so much in so many people in this world, and I feel so lucky to be one of them. Um, Jarrett Littman he's now the former director of bands at Claudia Taylor Johnson High School in San Antonio. That's where I student taught. I had known him for a couple years before then. He taught me in drum corps, and just had invested in me so much during my student teaching, and gave me opportunity to teach an ensemble almost every single day, and just get all of that experience that it's benefited me tenfold in the real world. Um, his big mentor and influence is a big mentor of mine. His name is Tom Bennett. He retired as the director of bands at the University of Houston, but was a band director in the Dallas area for many years. Mr. Bennett was my clinician at Churchill High School. He was the clinician at Claudia Taylor Johnson. He was the clinician at Rouse High School, and now he works with the kids at Ridgeview. So I've known him for over half my life, and he's had just such a tremendous impact of the way I structure things, the way I hear things. He's always so big on just getting students to think for themselves, and to kind of have opinions about their performance, and that's shaped me, that's shaped the kids, and I'm so grateful for him. Through Music for All, and flying up to the things like the National Concert Festival, I had the opportunity to witness a lot of programs, and get to know some really great people. And one of those was right when COVID hit. I got to know Mike Pote at Carmel High School, and we've been friends ever since. We bonded over. We're both big nerds about the Harmony Director, and if you ever get the chance to see his clinic at TMEA or Midwest, or he does something at the Summer Symposium every single year. It's incredible how he uses it, and he wrote a book, and we just kind of geeked out over COVID together about just how to make kids sound better, and do things like that. And I think someone that I really never got to personally meet very well, but was such a huge influence on all of the people I just mentioned, was Eddie Green. He unfortunately passed away a couple years ago, but he was
Mhm.
the longtime band director at Lake Highlands in the Richardson area, which is a suburb of Dallas. Huge pedagogue, um, responsible for a lot of the things that we do in Texas, and then moved down and went and was the director of bands at the University of Houston. And some of those recordings that he had at Lake Highlands, I have on vinyl or recordings of, and still listen to regularly because he just, no one was doing that before him, and the way that he did it, and was just so revolutionary to what we do here in Texas, and so important to many of my mentors that I couldn't be who I am without his influence, even though it wasn't direct.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share. I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure, talking to you today. Do you have any final words of advice, or even it doesn't even have to be on anything we've talked about? What is your final gift to our audience today, man?
I think it's to not get caught up in the keeping with the Joneses. Every program functions different, and it's really difficult to um, yes, we're all band programs, or yes, we're all music programs, but it's very difficult to compare apples to apples. It's apples to oranges. One community, even though they may be in the same zip code, is very different, and success is dependent upon, you know, in my belief, having happy students that enjoy and love being there, parents that see the value of your program and what you do for their kids and want to support it, administration that does the same, and then a staff that just loves coming to work every single day and just changing the lives of kids. And if you can do that, in my opinion, you're a successful program. And the other stuff will come, the state marching champions and things like that. Um, but you have to focus on your kids first.
Great advice. Well, I want to point out something because I see it floating down here under the banner. To our audience out there, I really believe that we are one community, and many of us love talking shop. And so there is Matt's email address, and if even just to say thank you or for being here or have questions, or even as I've learned, you never know when you touch somebody's heart or you touch somebody or you get some great advice. Like I don't think I have any original thoughts on teaching band. I think I've learned everything from everybody, and it's through meeting people like you, Matt. And thank you so much for coming on the show today. I think you are a gift, and I can't wait to see what you do over time. And thanks for coming on the show today.
Yeah, happy to do it, David. And I'm looking forward to this taking off, and maybe we can revisit in a year or two and talk through all the
Maybe we
things that
could
I was wrong about.
Maybe we could meet someday. That's the other unique things about these podcasts is, we're about 2,500 miles apart. Who knows when we'll get a chance to meet someday, but it'll be absolutely wonderful.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, as we close the show out today, I just wanted to talk about where we're headed, what's going on, and some of the things in the future. So, my next topic is going to be on student leadership. It's one of those things that I believe is the culture of the classroom. And so, like I said, I really want to take time to focus and get input from the audience on what are the things you want to hear about. But I'm trying. At first, we're going to bring some of the things that I think all of us like to hear, and it's never, ever ever a bad idea to revisit or do that. So next topic is going to be on student leadership. It's going to be with Scott Lang, and if you've never worked with Scott Lang, I highly advise you take a chance to find that man's website and find out who he is, because that man does leadership as good as anyone, and he is such a dynamic individual. But thanks for coming and listening to the free. You might be listening on this first show, but I really want to say thank you for allowing me to come into your network here, and I hope to do it a little bit more. So over time, help me shape the culture of this program, and I hope everything has been super fun for you. And we're going to see you hopefully here in the near future. Thanks for coming.